Last time we interviewed and we talked about Bernanke, you talked about him being a destroyer of money and a destroyer of wealth and an economic criminal. And I can't get past what he's doing to the United States with these policies, Marcus. He's debasing the currency. And it reminds you of Weimar Germany. When you talked to me about hyperinflation, there was a family that wanted to sell their house just to get out of the country and get a fresh start in the United States. And by the time they got to the port with their money, it wouldn't get them across the sea. And then there wasn't even enough for a bus ticket. So as you're going through that massive hyperinflation, I guess I'm just saying, how bad is it what this man is doing to this country or the direction he's taking us? That's my question for you.
Well, basically, we had monetary policies in the United States in the last 10 years under Mr. Greenspan and Mr. Bernanke that focused on core inflation rate and totally, I have to repeat, totally overlooked very strong credit growth and the creation of a credit bubble. I just got today a blog where a man writes that he bought in Arizona a house worth $740,000 with a $40,000 deposit. And he's not the only one. There were millions of people doing that. And that the Federal Reserve and the authorities, the banking authorities, could overlook these conditions is beyond my understanding. And for that, Fed deserves obviously to be blamed. Now, I'm aware that some people say Mr. Bernanke handled the crisis well, but I mean, in what context? He's like a captain who has a passenger ship, and he sinks the ship with 1,000 passengers, and all the passengers drown, and he then rescues the immediate crew around him of 5 officers in the commanding tower on a life-safe boat, and then receives the Medal of Honor for having saved 5 men when 1,000 people drowned.
How bad will this be for the United States as you see a currency debauched, even if the dollar isn't destroyed, if it's significantly devalued over time? Because, Mark, don't you destroy the fabric of a nation and its moral compass when you engage in these types of reckless money printing?
Yes, I think that the U.S. society has moved from a society of thrift and hard work and from being conservative in their financial matters in the last 150 years until about the 1970s into a society where it has become the norm to borrow money and to speculate, and where the speculation through the zero interest rate policy by the Federal Reserve is actually being increased and supported and encouraged. And that is the sad part about it, that measures undertaken by the government and its agencies, the Treasury Department, and obviously the Federal Reserve, are not good policies from an economic point of view in the long run. They're just a quick fix at the present time, and that's why I'm very, very negative both about society in the United States and the economy in the long run.
In the United States, when you engage in this, you have this type of hyperinflation. I'm going back to Germany, but it destroyed the savers, right, Mark? And it basically, when you look at it, some people were committing suicide. Many people were just fleeing the country altogether, and many were just wiped out. So they left the country completely discouraged. What are the aftermath effects of something like that? Are you chasing out the members of society that would normally be your savers and the people that would help to build a capitalist society? Because then we had the rise to fascism, right?
Yes, basically you discourage people from saving and you encourage them to speculate, and most are not very apt at speculating, and then they lose money or their wages go up less than the cost of living. In other words, in real terms, wages go down. And what you have in hyperinflating countries is an enormous increase in wealth and income inequality, which has happened to a large extent already in the United States and will continue, where the elite and the smart traders and the ones that have actually advanced information by the Treasury and the Federal Reserve can use this information ahead of the public benefit. And so eventually you impoverish not just the working class, but of course also the middle class, and you enrich a very narrow group of people. And when things really go bad, this very small group of people, the elites, then just leave the country and leave the mess behind. And that is what happened in most hyperinflation periods. It just favors big speculators at the expense of the population at large.
There's been a lot of heat on the government for Goldman Sachs' ties into the government, and you talked about the elites and basically them taking advantage of the country and then leaving. And these brokerage houses, and Gerald Celente talks about this, almost that they're crime syndicates and that it was this firm against this other firm. But you're talking, aren't you, about a consolidation of power? Because we saw Lehman go under, and one of the primary beneficiaries of that was Goldman Sachs, right? So isn't there, as you said, this further concentration of power for these surviving firms?
Well, usually in societies, when you look at the cycle towards the end of a civilization or society, the system becomes extremely corrupt, and there is a very close connection between government and the business elite, and at the end you actually don't know for sure who runs who. The government runs the business, or business runs the government, and that then leads to huge conflicts of interest and also to injustices.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Mark.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us at KingWorldNews.com. Remember to tune in next week for another great show where we will have Bob Prechter from Elliott Wave International, Peter Schiff from Euro Pacific Capital, and Jeff Burns, CEO of Pan American Silver. Also remember to go to our Gold Plus page for exclusive weekly interviews with Ted Butler and GATA, and the business page for Barry Ritholtz, author of Bailout Nation.